out on the other side of that issue, and we do have to worry about monetizing the debt and other things they might do, and we should have more control over them than we do. I don't want to have Congress voting on these things all the time, but I mean there needs to be some measure of oversight of what they do, and also we should leaven their boards with more publicly appointed governors rather than bank appointed governors, so that there's public interest, not the bank's interest. So there's a gentleman right behind you, Nancy.
First, I want to say thank you very much for everything you've done and the way you vote. I have followed the way you vote over the last couple years. Something along these same lines with the bank. I sent you a long email, so this whole document you have already. I want to read something here. I believe that banking institutions are more dangerous to our liberties than standing armies. The American people ever allow private banks to control the issue of their currency, first by inflation, then by deflation. The banks and corporations that will grow up around the banks will deprive the people of all property until their children wake up homeless on the continent their fathers conquered. This issuing power should be taken away from the banks and restored to the people to whom it properly belongs. Thomas Jefferson. Why are we over our heads in debt, laboring under a debt money system called fractional reserve banking, which is designed and controlled by private bankers, also called the money changers? What can we do about this?
Well, I mean, most places I go, people would agree with my concerns and your concerns about the Federal Reserve and the privatization, essentially, of our currency. And we don't even know how much it was. I guess it's $2 to $3 trillion of support, other than the TARP that they put out there. And again, Matt has written some great articles about it. It's pretty outrageous when you read it. So starting with an audit would be the place to go. And I think it's a good place for the people of the United States to kind of call the bluff of the Republican Congress and say, no, wait a minute. Because they made, last year, people get confused. I voted for a straight out audit of the Federal Reserve Ron Paul bill. Brought it up in the House, Democrats let it come up. We passed it. Senate wouldn't take it up. So then when we did financial services reform, which the industry fought bitterly, and to me it's a mere shadow of what we should have done to these people, they spent, the financial services industry spent $1 million a day for over a year lobbying Congress. They had more lobbyists than there were members of Congress to try and water down that bill, and they were quite successful. We needed much more reform. But at the end, there's a thing called a motion to recommit, which is a bill comes up, this was financial services reform. Most of the Republicans were going to vote against it. But they have a motion to recommit. So their motion to recommit was repeal financial services reform altogether. That is, go back to the pre-crash regulation of Wall Street, but audit the Federal Reserve. They're trying to say the whole problem was over here and not over there, and the price of, and I said, no. So I voted no on that because I was not going to do away with the reforms we got in order to get an audit. But then they went running around doing press releases and saying all these people are hypocritical because they voted for an audit and now they're voting against an audit. No, we were voting against a trick, which was let's not regulate Wall Street at all and let's audit the Federal Reserve. We need to do both. We need to regulate Wall Street, who now are about 40% of our economy. They should be 20, that's what they were historically. And we need to rein in the speculation, and we need to deal with the Federal Reserve. We got to do them both. And it's time to call on the Republican Congress and anybody any other state, get in touch with their representatives and say, when are we going to get that audit bill that you guys were so hot on in the last Congress? When are you going to let it come up on the floor for a vote? I think they could do it under suspension of the rules with 40 minutes of debate and a 2/3 vote required. I think it would pass. Let's do it. I mean, we don't have to spend much time on it, and let's audit it.
Can I have one more thing?
Real quick.
Why can't we pay off the national debt with debt-free notes, just like Abraham Lincoln did with the greenbacks and the notes that he provided back then?
I think it'd be a little bit of a problem in the current world economy. We had a little discussion about how other people look at our money and our debt. So, I think we're going to have to work our way down on the debt. There's a gentleman down front who's had his hand up a long time, so we're calling him. So we're going to give you the microphone.
I have a question and concern about the Veterans Administration and their procedure in for benefits, if you file for benefits. One thing is, I've been with them for probably 12 years as getting medical care. And just recently, they have changed my number, per se, and so now they're requiring that I spend $24 per prescription, $15 every office visit, and everything else, but they're basing that on income that I had in 2009. Back in 2009, not a problem, I could afford that. Now I can't afford that. So is there anything that Congress can do or something to step in and say, hey, take a look at this, and some of these vets out here are starving, and you're still charging them from 2 years ago, based on that income?
Well, I have two people who work full-time on veterans problems in my office, and right in the middle there's a woman, Phyllis Wagner, in black, with her hand up, and she's in charge of what I call my casework section, and we can get an answer to that. I'm not aware that they had a 2-year look back for income. I don't think they're supposed to, so we'll try and get to the bottom of that. So talk to Phyllis. We'll get your, I know, but we'll get your details, and we'll try and work it. Like I say, and anybody who's dealt with Frank Van Cleve, a lot of people like Frank, has been my veterans caseworker for 13 years. Frank's retiring, and he earned it. But Shannon Smythe, who's right now working in my office as part of something called the Wounded Warrior Program, is going to become my head caseworker, and then I've got another veteran who will be his assistant. So we're still going to be there, and we'll do what we can to get to the bottom of that. I'm just not aware of why they'd be looking back 2 years. So right there. Oh, I promised I'd look this way, and I haven't. So right there, New York over there, Mr. Then we'll get you. You'll be next. All right. Yeah. Well, I said I'd look back, and I didn't. I keep reading.
Okay, you're not going to hold it. Being a Yankees fan, you're not going to hold that against me. Okay.
We don't have a major league team, so we can be agnostic.
So you mentioned you want to end speculation, and you want to decrease the deficit and the debt. So one of my questions is, what's wrong with the stock transfer excise tax, which would both end speculation, rein in a lot of these financials that are causing these problems, and help us out financially. The other question is, so you mentioned, I applaud your efforts on toning down Iraq and Afghanistan, defunding it. But you say, well, we're going to do this GAO audit of the Pentagon, which I applaud greatly, but that's going to target waste. So, we've got $1 trillion that's going to this huge complex, this empire that we really don't need now. So, is there anything besides, like, you mentioned the Capu Commission of 12 people that are, they're not going to, if they don't agree on something and it goes to a mandatory cut, at least the Pentagon will be cutting it. Is there any other way to get the Pentagon cut besides doing that?
Well, I tell you, I am getting a bit tired of. I remember the Pentagon, but I'm trying to remember the first question. I have a bill which I've introduced since I first introduced it back in the mid-90s on a transfer tax. We had a transfer tax in this country from 1916 to 1966. It started out at 1/5 of 1%. And back in those days, Congress had a little more guts. So at the height of the Great Depression, FDR said, I need money for reconstruction, and they doubled the tax to 0.4 of 1%. Now, the fun thing about that is, a few years ago, I was being interviewed by this guy, Stuart Gorney, because he was very upset about my transfer tax. And he's on Fox Business, British accent. And so I said, Stuart, he started in on me. I said, Stuart, I just wanted to come on. I've really been thinking about this, and let me read you a few quotes, because I got to understand that maybe this is a problem. And he said, great. So I read a couple of quotes, and they were about how this would be the end of capitalism, how all the capital would flee the United States of America, how there'd be no more jobs created in this country, how the economy would never recover. They were pretty strong quotes. And he's saying, yeah. I said, Stuart, you know when those were written? I said those were written in 1934 when FDR got them to double the tax, and guess what? The stock market only went up from there. And because we rebuilt the real economy, and then Wall Street, lives on the back of the real economy in those days. So And then I pointed out to him also, and he got very upset about that in Britain they have a 0.5% tax on transfers, and I hadn't seen that all of the rich brokers had moved off of Fleet Street and out of London and gone to Doha where they don't have a tax, or China where they don't have a tax. So he got very upset about that. So I've introduced it a number of times. There is this internet myth out there, in case any of you run into it. We had 20,000 hits on my website 2 weeks ago because the myth keeps jumping up. There's a guy named Chaka Fatah, Ways and Means member, African American, name's not very similar, you know, he doesn't look much like me, and he's from Philadelphia. He has a bill that would tax all financial transactions. I've never fully read it, but apparently it would tax, like, you know, deposits in the bank and, you know, and your checks and stuff like that. Anyway, it's a crazy bill. No one's ever sponsored it except him. It's never had a hearing. It's not going anywhere. Somehow someone at the height of the campaign wrote an op-ed in the St. Petersburg Times saying his bill was my bill. And I have since then had tens of thousands of people, just had my staff arguing with a woman last week, because now they've even modified. They got analyzed by Snopes and PolitiFact, who said this is liar, liar, pants on fire, and they have now edited Snopes and PolitiFact to say that that is my bill. So, you know, so this kind of stuff goes on out there. So there's no one who's trying. I'm working with Senator Harkin. We're working on a new version of a speculator tax. We're getting more support from economists because people think it's crazy what's going on Wall Street right now. 60% to 70% of the daily volume is traded by supercomputers, high volume trading. One day, one hedge fund had 2 people that supervised their supercomputer, traded 60% of the NASDAQ, 2 people. I mean, this is just what, you know, you wonder why the stock market's volatile. We haven't ever been able to reinstate the uptick rule that was repealed during the Bush administration, so that they can infinitely drive stocks down, and then suddenly they're driving them back up again after people start dumping. So there's a whole lot of manipulation going on. So we will be reintroducing our bill in the not too distant future.